Okay, so this is what you should see when you log into Xendee. Of course, I have a lot more projects, but yeah, you'll see this basic landing page. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're going to create a project from scratch together, just going through a very simple microgrid model. So here from this kind of upper right section, under here, you're gonna see a new project. And you're going to see several options for new projects to create. You're not going to have access to all of them just because of your trial license limitations. But today we are just going to work with a new design project, which is what majority of our microgrid designs are done in. So go ahead and click New Design Project. Okay, so here it'll bring us to a setup page because when you start a project, you need to enter details and kind of give it a foundation. So here under project name, go ahead and name your title or title your project. For this example, we are going to model the San Diego airport. So for me, I just like to keep it kind of detailed and straightforward. So here, I'm just gonna say like San Diego Airport microgrid demo. And under project team, you are going to probably just select your team. Some of you have a license with us already, so you're not going to see the Microgrid 101 course team. So just go ahead and put it on your own team. And project location, actually, I am going to share the address with you all in the Zoom chat, so you can just copy and paste it. So how do I, one second. In the chat, in the Zoom window, you should see an address and you can just copy and paste that into your project address location. Or you can just type it according to what I have here, 3225 North Harbor Drive in San Diego. So once you do that, you'll see what Xendee automatically does is it will bring up the Google image location of that location. And if you want, you can, reposition your site point. So right here, it's like kind of off to the side. So I'm just gonna double click closer to like the middle terminal 1. And once that looks good, you can go ahead and click project options next. So then this next page is just going to ask for your project options, like your units, currency, and project year. I am just going to leave it all as default for now. For multi-node, I am just going to leave it as no, because today we are going to be working in single node. And for grid connected, I'm going to leave as yes, because we are going to be working with the utility. But if you have an islanded microgrid or a microgrid with no access to the utility, you can turn this to no. But for now, we're going to leave as yes. So let's go ahead and click technology options. So here is where you'll see all of the different technologies that you can model in Xendee. And you can enable or disable them to add them to your model later. So here you'll see by default, it has enabled the most common technologies like solar, battery storage, EV charging. But of course, you can turn them off or on if you want. I'm just going to leave it all as default for now. But if later you decide that you actually do want to add another technology to your model, you can always go back to your settings and change this page. But for now, let's all leave it as default and click confirm settings. So here it'll just bring us to a review page of all our project settings. So this would be like your global settings, your project options, as well as the technologies. So once this all looks good to you, you can go ahead, scroll all the way down and click accept and create new project. And once you do that, Xendee is going to bring us to our model on our Google image overview of our address, which at the bottom right corner, you have this little zoom in, zoom out control. So you can zoom out or zoom in if you want to see your whole project better. So when we start a project, we are always going to have 3 icons on the map. So that's going to be controller, utility connection, and our building load. The controller is purely visual. You can add an install cost in there if you want to account for it, but this icon is purely visual. It's just to signify that your microgrid will probably have a controller of some sort. Our utility connection icon signifies our connection to the utility as far as costs, emissions, and also just weather data. So here you can add restraints in regard to interconnection, like how much your site can draw or export power. You can also change the emission characteristics of your utility. But by default, Xendee is just going to pull the emissions data for the closest utility source. In this case, it's from California ISO for San Diego, but you can always upload your own emissions data if you have that. And next, for costs, you can also add in any infrastructure costs related to your utility if it has any. You can also just add any extra capital costs or operational costs that won't be captured with the technologies that you're adding. And then lastly, you can edit your temperature data if you like. But again, it's just going to pull automatic data from the closest source for your location. For this project, we are all just going to leave this icon alone for now. Okay, so we have our San Diego model ready to go. So for this example, what I'm going to take you all through is we're going to consider adding some renewable technologies. So for our case, our project, what we're going to do is we're going to add existing technologies first. So in this case, our site is going to have existing boiler because it has a heating demand. It has some existing solar PV as well. But we're trying to figure out is if we want to add even more solar PV as the airport expands, and if we want to figure out if we want to add battery energy storage, as well as a CHP generator. But the first thing we need to do is to add our building loads into our model. So let's go ahead and double click on the load icon here. So when you pull up your load icon, you'll always have several options as to entering your load, which Lulu has covered a little bit earlier. Since we have our data file available, we can just utilize the enter load shape. So this is where we're going to use the load files that we shared in the email prior to those class. Okay, so we have 2 load files that we're going to enter, the electricity load and the heating load. So let's click on enter load shape. So here you are going to need to define a few things. So first, you need to define your load shape start date, because more than likely, if you have a complete 8760 or some sort of time interval file for your site, it's probably going to be historical data, which is what we have as well, because the data we have provided is from 2018. So we are going to change that start date to 2018, January 1st. For type, let's go with electricity only first, because we are uploading our electricity demand. We have hourly data, so we can leave time step as 1 hour and the units as kilowatt. And here, click on Browse, and we are going to navigate to wherever you saved your San Diego electricity only profile. Remember, it's this one. It's called San Diego Airport electricity only kilowatt hour. So click on this. You can also see in the file name that it's from 2018. So go ahead and upload this. Once you do that, you'll see we have now an electricity only demand. And then if you scroll down, you'll see Xendee will make a little preview dispatch graph of what your electricity demand looks like on a typical weekday, what it looks like on a typical weekend day, as well as a typical peak day for every month. So that's electricity. Now let's go back up and enter our other load shape, which is heating. And again, we are also going to change our load start date to 2018, January 1st. And then this time for type, we are going to change it to space heating. For time step, we're going to leave it as 1 hour. And for units, we are going to keep it as kilowatt therms. So here again, navigate to wherever you saved your heating profile. For this one, it's the San Diego water heating. Okay, so it's water heating, my bad. We can change it to water heating. So now we have this. Go ahead and click upload file. And once we do that, you'll see we now have a water heating demand as well as a new tab right beneath where we have our preview. So here we can click on water heating to see what it looks like over average weekdays, weekend days, as well as peak days. So hopefully everyone is caught up, but just to summarize what I did on this page. So here in the load icon is where you would upload or create all of your different energy demands for your site. For most of the time, you are definitely going to have an electricity profile, but of course, if you have thermal profiles or refrigeration profiles, you can also upload them in here. So what we did here is we use directly the enter load shape button to upload both of our electricity and water heating profile. Okay, so once that all looks good, at the bottom left corner, it is very important that you click save because if you just exit out of this or cancel it, it will forget about all the work you have done. So go ahead and click save in the bottom left corner when you're ready. Perfect. So now that we have our load shape defined, the next thing I always do is I move on to defining the tariff or the electricity rates that we're going to be paying the utility. So on the left-hand side here, remember we have all these tabs, and let's click on electricity. So the electricity tab is where you would define your electric utility tariff for your energy charges. So here you'll see when you first pull this up, it will just basically be a blank slate. It will always have a default value, but we won't be using this. So you have several options when you get here. You can manually build your tariff because you have the options to define different seasons for each month. You have the option to enter in the rates. You can also add time of use periods if you have a time of use tariff. You can also add tiers if your tariff is based on tiers of usage. You can also add real-time pricing data if you have an RTP file. But for today, we are going to leverage the Xendee tool. So remember, Xendee is a third-party company. They do a very good job of maintaining a bunch of tariffs over North America. So on the left-hand side here, we are going to click on Xendee. And once you do that, it's going to pull up the appropriate load serving entity based on our project location. In this case, since we're in San Diego, it's going to pull up San Diego Gas and Electric for us. But if your project's somewhere else, it's going to pull up whatever utility is local to your project. So go ahead and click select. And it's going to pull up all of the different tariffs that are available for that utility. There's a lot of them. If you know your tariff code or name, you can just directly search this up. And in this case, we are just going to look this up. So our tariff is going to be this one I have typed here. It's the distributed generation renewable direct access NEM2 tariff. You can also probably just type in like NEM2 and find this tariff. So I'm going to click on that to select it. And it's going to ask you for the effective date, which I am just going to leave as today. So it pulls up the most recent version of this tariff. But if you're doing like historical modeling or want to use an earlier version, you can always roll back the date to an earlier date. But I'm just going to leave it as today. And click next. So on this page, it's going to ask a series of applicability values based on your tariff. Not all tariffs are going to have these questions. Some might. And when you model, you are probably going to want to take the time to read through all these questions and select the appropriate values for your connection. But for today, I'm just going to leave as a default values for now, since the default values are probably going to be the most common selections anyways. So then if we scroll down to the bottom, we can click calculate tariff rates. And through this Genability API, it's going to calculate the most recent tariffs and charges for our site. And then on this page, you can review your tariff information and see the consumption rates and demand rates and export rates if your specific tariff has any. Once that all looks good, let's click import tariff to bring this back into our project. So now you'll see we have automatically pulled in those charges from Genability back into our tariff page. So here on the main page, which is the energy charges tab, you'll see it has automatically defined our seasons because our tariff is seasonal. It has added in different periods and their respective charges, since this is also a time of use period, time of use tariff. And then if you scroll down, you'll see we also have our time of use periods defined for every single season as well. And then if you scroll back up, you'll see there's a separate tab for demand charges. And you'll see it has also brought in demand charges for our tariff. And if we scroll down to the bottom, you'll see this tariff. You might have to click this toggle to show your demand constraints, but you'll see this tariff actually has a minimum demand constraint of 20 kilowatts. This is common with a lot of tariffs. And what this is actually going to do in Xendee is it is also going to make sure that your site draws at least 20 kilowatts of energy from the utility. And then if your site does not have that requirement or it can't do that, it will actually give you an infeasible solution. By infeasible, I mean is when our algorithm cannot solve for a solution based on your constraints. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm actually going to delete the minimum constraint, the minimum 20 kilowatt constraint. This is technically not realistic and it technically violates the tariff. But for this example, I am going to delete the constraint just in case our load profile is not high enough. Yeah, so I've deleted this. If you don't delete this, you may get an infeasibility, but you can always come back and fix it. Okay, and then if we go back up, we'll see the rest of the tabs are just going to cover fees. If your tariff has any access, contract fees, or like standby charges. The last one is going to be on exports. So you can always define your own custom sales price as well as add metering constraints. But for our purpose, we're just going to leave it as what the tariff has imported for us. So once that all looks good to you, go ahead and click Save in the bottom left corner again. So now that has saved our tariff information. Okay, so now we have our building load profiles defined as well as our utility tariff. We can start adding our technologies. So just as a reminder, our airport is going to have some existing technologies already. So let's go ahead and add that first, because you generally want to model your base case or current scenario first. So we are going to first add our existing boiler. And to do that, at the bottom of your screen, you're going to see the symbols tab. So click that, and then you'll see the technologies that we have enabled to be added to our model. So let's click on boiler. And this is going to bring us to set up a boiler for our model. So at the top of every single technology that you add to your model, you're going to see first thing, the technology decision. And the technology decision is basically going to let Xendee know how to treat your technology when it's doing its thing, optimizing and calculating the best solution. So in this case, our boiler is existing. It's already on site. So what we're going to do is we're going to mark it to existing. So this just means that the optimization will know and it will include our boiler as one of the technologies, but it's not going to invest in new boilers. But if in the case that you do want to consider investing in new boilers, you can change that to existing and more. But we're not going to do that in this case. We're just going to leave it as existing. And if you have an existing technology, you are going to have to define the existing technology size. So in this case, we have a 2000 kilowatt boiler, and you also have to define its age, because every single technology you add will have a lifetime parameter. Because if your project length is longer than your technology's lifetime, it will need to be replaced during some point when your technology expires. So here, just define our existing age so that our optimization can know if it needs to replace the boiler or not during our project length. And then the rest of this page is just going to be your investment specifications as well as your technical specifications. Xendee is always going to have default values for everything. And these values are just based on like industry averages. But of course, you can overwrite that if you want. You can also leverage our catalog functionality or save your own custom boiler to your own catalog. But for now, we're just going to leave it as the default values. And then once that all looks good, you can again click Save in the bottom left corner to save your existing boiler. Okay, and once you do that, you'll see we now have a boiler icon on our map. Okay, and the one other technology that we're going to add to our existing base case is our solar PV that's already on site. So on the bottom symbols tab here, let's go ahead and click on solar PV. Okay, so remember when I said before that for this theoretical site, we have solar PV on site already, but the airport wants to know if it will be economically attractive to add even more solar PV as the site expands. So we have existing solar on site, which normally you could model as existing. But since for this scenario, we want to know if it will be attractive to add even more solar PV, we can now use the existing or plus more decision. So what this is going to do is we're going to account for our existing PV in our optimization, but Xendee is also going to tell us if it will be attractive to add additional solar capacity. So again, we are going to need to define our existing solar capacity that's on site. In this case, we already have 800 kilowatts of solar PV, and the existing panels are 5 years old. And this is optional, but you can also limit how much additional capacity that Xendee could tell you to invest in. But if you don't type in or anything, you just leave it blank, Xendee can consider as much as possible. And then if we scroll down, you're also going to see, again, investment specifications. And then solar is going to have some more parameters just because it is a slightly more involved technology. So here you'll also see inputs for defining space. So here, if you click on this define tool, it's actually going to allow us to draw a space on our map to estimate how much install space we have for our solar. So it'll bring us to this little draw function. So if you click on this draw button here, we can draw some polygons. Oops. We can draw some polygons around our building. This is probably going to be more useful if you have like a neat rectangular building. But you can draw polygons on your rooftop just to like estimate how much space you have. And then once you complete your polygon, you'll see Xendee is going to automatically calculate the area that's defined within this polygon. And then it's going to calculate an area that's defined with the factor. And this factor is just going to account for spacing for, actual solar PV installation and how much you actually could probably use for your panels. You can change this if you want. And then if we click update, it's going to bring that install space back into our specification. But of course, you don't have to use this. You can totally override this and like manually type in a space if you have a number already. And then if we scroll down, you are going to see some parameters regarding incentives because most of the time solar will get some sort of incentive credit or rebates. But for now, I'm just going to leave these as a default. And then if we scroll down to the bottom, you'll see we have to define our solar PV technical specifications. So we have two ways of doing this. So first, you can directly upload your solar PV performance data. And this window will take two data files. So first, it will take solar PV performance. So that's like irradiation data if you have that available. You can also directly input a PV power output, so like the kilowatts that's actually generated. And of course, whatever file you input in Xendee, it has to be in the format that's in a time interval for a complete year. But of course, if you don't have this file, that's totally okay, because what you can do otherwise is you can type in your efficiency as well as your panel's tilt array, its pointing, DC-AC ratio. And then if you click on compute, what this is going to do is it's going to pull in a performance file using PV Watts. PV Watts is a third-party website that does a really good job at estimating and generating solar performance based on your location as well as your PV's specifications. So this is what we're going to do for now. So I'm just going to leave all the PV specifications as a default, but once you click compute, it's going to compute a solar performance curve based on our location. And you can see in the bottom right, like what the source of your performance curve is. And once that all looks good, we can go ahead and click save in the bottom left corner again. And now, of course, we have our solar PV icon on the map as well. Okay, so those are our two existing technologies, just to summarize. So we have our existing boiler, and that's already on site, and this boiler is responsible for currently meeting our space or our water heating demand. And we've set it to existing because it's already on site. And of course, we have our solar PV that's on site as well. But since we want to know if we should add more additional solar PV capacity, we set it to existing and more. So this lets Xendee consider additional solar PV investments in our optimization later. So now our airport also wants to know if it will be beneficial to add a battery energy storage system as well as a CHP generator. So let's go back to our symbols tab at the bottom here and click on battery storage. So at the top here, we don't have any battery energy storage. We're trying to figure out if it will be economically attractive to add a battery storage. So we're going to leave the decision as consider. So Xendee is going to solve for us if it's going to be a good idea to add a battery. And again, you can add a max new size if you want, but I'm just going to leave it as blank. So there's no upper limit on how much we can consider. Again, I'm going to leave the investment specs and the technical specs all as the default values, but of course, you can change this for your modeling. And at the bottom here, you'll see you can actually pick a different tariff for batteries if your battery can charge on like a cheaper or just a different tariff. For this case, we only have one tariff defined, so we're just going to leave that as for now. Okay, so we've left everything as the default values. So when you're ready, click save in the bottom left corner. And again, we have our battery on our map. Okay, now let's add our last technology we want to consider, which is going to be a CHP generator. So in the bottom symbols tab here, you're going to see two generators, diesel generator and gas generator. Since our generator is going to be a combined heat and power or CHP generator, we're going to click on gas generator. So here we have our generator window. This is also going to be a new technology that we're trying to figure out if it's going to be a good idea to install. So we're going to put the decision as consider. You can set a max number if you want. For the generator, I am going to leave everything as the default values, but one very important thing we need to change here is under technical specifications. Since our generator is going to be a CHP, which means that it's going to be capable of both generating electricity as well as heat, we are going to need to turn the CHP toggle to yes. If you leave it as no, it's going to be a purely electrical generating generator. If you turn this on, we're also going to get heat. And notice that when you turn this on, a few things is going to pop up, including this heat and power ratio, which I'm just going to leave as a default. And once that all looks good, we can click Save in the bottom left corner. Okay, so now we have all of our technologies added to our model. And okay, so let's do this first. Let's run just a regular optimization to see what technologies Xendee recommends for us to add. And then if we have like a little bit of extra time, we can add an outage scenario as well. Okay, so now back to our optimization. So at the main tab up here, if you click on this main button, you'll see this tab drop down. So click on optimize. And here is going to bring us to our optimize window. So first, you are always going to have to name your optimizations. I like to keep it very specific because when you model, you're probably going to end up running a whole bunch of different optimizations, just for comparison, or try out different settings. So for this one, let's name it like reduce cost because that's what we're going to try and do. You have some other options here regarding your optimization, like you can implement a carbon tax if you have that. You can also require your solution to be a certain percentage renewable if you like. You can also require a net zero solution. But for now, I'm just going to leave these as a default. And then under optimization decision, you are always going to need to pick an objective. So by default, it's going to be reduce cost, which means Xendee is going to solve for us the most cost-efficient solution. But of course, you can change it to reduce carbon emissions if that's your goal. But for now, we're just going to run a reduce cost optimization to find the cheapest solution overall. And then if you scroll down, you are also going to see we have a section for reference model because when Xendee solves a investment scenario, it's going to calculate your savings both in terms of costs as well as carbon emissions related to the reference model. So in this case, the default is going to be what we call Xendee computed. And by Xendee computed, that just means Xendee is also going to optimize whatever your current baseline scenario is. So for our case, remember our baseline scenario is our utility connection, our existing boiler, as well as our existing solar capacity. So if we leave it as Xendee computed, Xendee is going to calculate our new investment scenarios, cost savings, and emission savings compared to our baseline. But of course, you may not always have a baseline if it's like a new project, or you may want to compare it to another optimization, or you may want to enter values yourself. So you can always pick those as well. But for here, we're just going to leave it as Xendee computed so we can compare against our current baseline. And at the bottom here, we have our analysis configurations, which Lulu went over earlier. Feel free to play around with these later as well, but for now, we're just going to leave them turned off and just go with the regular optimization. So when you're ready, click Run Optimization. And then you'll see Xendee will start to run your project optimization here. You are able to run up to 3 optimizations at the same time. So if you have an optimization running, you can go ahead and like make changes to your project and then go run another optimization right away. if you have the extra analysis configurations like time series, multi-year, or sensitivity analysis turned on, those optimizations will probably take longer just because there's more constraints in the optimization. But then you'll see at the top here, looks like my optimization just finished. Yours should probably take only like a couple of seconds as well. But let's go ahead and click on Show Optimization Results. And of course, this will bring us to our optimization report. So every single optimization you run, you're going to get a report. So at the top here, it's going to give us the main summary. So in this table here, remember I said Xendee is going to calculate the savings regards to the base case. So in this case, we can see our reference cost for our baseline. And then we're going to see the new costs as well as emissions for our new investment scenario. And you'll see that here we actually get a significant amount of savings for our annual system costs. And then we do get like a tiny bit of CO2 emissions savings. And then on the right hand side here, you'll see what Xendee has solved to be the best new investment for us in this case. So in this case, you'll see Xendee has solved that the best new combination to install will be 1 megawatts of additional solar capacity. And remember, this is going to be in addition to our existing solar that's already on site. So this 1 megawatt solar will be new. And then it's decided that we could do with a very large battery. Of course, this battery may be realistically might be too expensive to install, but remember you can always add a constraint to the maximum size of battery that your model could invest in. And then it's invested in some generators for us. Remember, these are CHP generators, so they're capable of both generating heat and electricity. So then if we scroll down, you'll see a whole bunch of different tabs for your report. The summary tab is basically going to summarize your considered value streams. And so basically where your system could have gotten savings from, and then where it actually got its savings from. And then just some breakdown charts. So I encourage you to go through the report more carefully on your own, but I'm going to move on to some of the more detailed tabs in our chart. So the next chart is the financial data tab, which is going to have a lot of really good information, especially for like your proposals or like your investors or developers. So it's going to have charts breaking down the microgrid cost for you, both for your base case and your new investment scenario. And then if you scroll all the way down, you're going to see these cash flow tables. So if you click on this drop-down menu, you're going to see a cash flow table in terms of cost as well as savings. So the cost table, it's what it implies. It's the cost to run your systems, and it's going to be broken down by a bunch of different line items. So the top section is like your utilities, your fuel, any maintenance costs, and then as well as your CapEx for your new investments, your incentives if you have any. It's also going to take into consideration any replacements costs if you have any technologies that will need to be replaced before the end of the project length. And if you change this drop-down menu to savings, we're now going to see a table in terms of savings. And this is going to show savings relative to the reference. So remember, our reference scenario is our existing baseline. So that's going to be our utility, our existing boiler, and our existing solar PV. So now it's going to show that in this new case, we are going to save 922K in demand charges compared to our previous baseline. So you'll see the positive numbers means that we're making savings. We are saving money in those line items. But you'll see we'll have some negative numbers here. So for example, we actually have negative savings in fuel purchase costs because we're now using more fuel. And we have negative here in the DR maintenance cost because our DR maintenance cost is now more than the reference case. So highly encourage you to go through this cash flow table in detail as well, because it really breaks down exactly where your costs are coming from, as well exactly where you're getting savings from. So it's really important you understand exactly how you're getting savings with this new configuration. Okay, so let's go to our next tab, which is the utility data tab. So this is a simulated utility bill because remember, we are still going to have to pay our utility for some electricity consumption as well as gas consumption. So this is going to be a kind of a simulated utility bill of how much you're going to be paying for utility. So here you'll see it has different charts for your monthly demand, energy consumption from the utility, as well as how the utility breaks down. And then here, if you scroll down, you'll see our annual electricity charges, demand charges, and fuel charges. But here, you can change the viewing from annual to a monthly breakdown. So all of this here, it's showing annual numbers. But if you change this from annual to like January, you'll now see our charges for January. And here, this little table is also going to show your new billing total compared to the reference scenario. So how much we were paying the utility before to operate our site, and then how much you're saving. Remember, this is all also going to be reflected back in your financial cash flow table. Okay, so now let's go to our next tab, the energy balance and technology investments. So this tab is going to basically have some pie charts that just kind of summarize your overall systems breakdowns, exactly where the energy demands are, how it's being met. So these charts are useful for, proposal making, for sharing with your developers, as well as just understanding the new composition of your site heating balance, energy balance, emissions, technologies. So explore this in detail as well when you have the chance. And then the next tab, dispatch by end use. This is one of the most important parts of the report. So honestly, if you don't have time to go through every single report, you should always at least check the dispatch by end use graph, because this visual chart will actually show you how your site's demands are being met throughout the day, and as well as where the energy is coming from. So you'll see here, you can change the month. You can also change the day type. So instead of looking at a typical weekday, you can look at a typical weekend day or peak day. And so let's just take a look at this chart here and break down what it means. So you'll see here, this black line is going to be our site's demand. So this black line symbolizes our electrical demand. And you'll see most of it is going to be fulfilled by the dark blue, which is utility purchase. And then you'll see during the daytime here, we have some little yellow bars, and that's going to represent our solar PV. And then during the daytime as well, we're going to see a little bit of gas generator usage just to help shape the peak demand a little bit. And then in the evening, is where we're going to discharge the majority of our battery, because remember, we have a time of use tariff, and evening hours are usually the most expensive times to purchase electricity from the utility. So then this is where we are discharging most of our battery. And if you look at the top here, you'll see next to our electricity dispatch, we also have a heating dispatch tab. If we switch over to that, you'll see our heating profile instead. So you'll see here the black is our water heating demand, and you'll see that instead of being met by our existing boiler, it can now be met by our CHP gas generator, because remember, our gas generator is capable of both producing electricity as well as heat. So when that gas generator is generating electricity throughout the day, at the same time, it can just use waste heat to meet our space heating demand. And what this means that we don't have to run our boiler anymore, which is also just going to save us some money as well. And of course, you can change the month to see how the dispatch changes throughout the season. If you go to August, which of course is probably going to have more solar consumption, you can see the solar generation goes up a little bit. Okay, and then the last sections of the report are going to be just summarizing the operation of your system. So operation summaries of your technologies. Finally, you have the option to customize as well as print your report into a PDF. So here you can enable your report customization mode. And what this is going to do is you can kind of select and deselect tabs or graphics or visuals that you want to include or exclude from your report. And then, of course, you can preview that report and download it. Now, we're a little bit short on time. We're almost to the top of the hour here. So just last few things. Of course, explore this report more when you have the chance. And remember, we modeled a pretty simple case here, but of course, please explore the tool on your own. Try adding different technologies. Try adding an outage scenario if you have a site that has resiliency requirements. Try adding in multi-year escalators if you want to account for future changes like inflation, rising costs.
Thank you all so much for joining, and hope to see you soon.